welcome to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory. Thank you all for being here. Tonight we continue our exploration of astrophotography with Bruce Feagle. And as we're getting going, I want to give a special thank you to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory Foundation. It's through that foundation that we're able to have events like these. And so again, thank you to the foundation. Now again, Bruce Feagle's back again, and those of you guys who are here for the other talks, you already are familiar with him, but let's go ahead and reintroduce him, as Bruce Feagle's creativity is really quite phenomenal. It really defies categories. He is a visionary and an industry pro. He operates a multiple discipline, I can't talk tonight. Anyway, multiple-disciplinary film production agency born of innovative thinking. He's worked in capacities ranging from musician, audio engineer, recording engineer, director of photography, editor, and director, having worked with numerous music and film legends. He has bridged the gap between computers, music, and video. His musical experience and ear play a role in his creative approach in a happy merger of left and right brain. And so I'll have you guys join me in welcoming back Bruce Feagle.
I'll simplify that for the next time around. Hey everybody, thanks for coming. So a lot of the night is just going to be staring at a computer screen. So we'll be following along up here as best you can. So let's just jump in. As normal, you could do these kinds of things that I'm about to do in a lot of different software packages. But I'm going to be talking about these specifically tonight. They're the ones I use and I'm the most familiar with. And I think they're fairly powerful. PixInsight, Astro tool, phenomenal. Extraordinaire. It does so many things that we're not even going to talk about tonight. I probably used 10-15% of its capabilities. And Lightroom Classic, a little touch-up, and depending on how far we get, we may end up in a little Photoshop talking comment compositing. Some of the things that I add onto my software, this is all inside PixInsight. Graxpert, this is another script you can add to it. It's free. I would recommend it. It's really it's for gradient removal and helping to flatten out the image. Herbert Walter has a great script that's also free. It's called AutoColor, and you'll see it in a little bit, use it when I use it, and you'll see why I love it. Took all the manual adjustments of creating a good starting color point out and made it automatic. RC Astro, they're phenomenal. These do, so AutoColor is free. I don't know if I mentioned it. Blur Exterminator, Star Exterminator, and Noise Exterminator from RC Astro are not free, but they incorporate some of the newer AI tools for each one of those kind of things that it's hinting at there. The AI tool is not quite cheating. I'll get into it as we get into what they're doing specifically when I use those tools, but they're basically combining a lot of processes that I used to have to do to create, that is now drag and drop. So I'll kind of explain that as we get into it a little bit, so let's just dive in. So we're going to leave this and head over to PixInsight, which I've already got a few things set up. So all the images that we've collected from last week's examples that we talked about, the imaging files, the light files basically, the calibration files, your bias, your darks, and your flat fields are all going to kind of come together now, and we're going to use a couple of scripts in here to simplify a lot of the processes that would combine them together to create your master light files that you then want to create your color palettes out of. But to start out, after you've shot all those images, a lot of times they're not great. They have problems. So what I'm going to do is within PixInsight, and like I said, I'm going to talk about what I'm doing inside here. They have a tool called Blink, and what you can do is you can load all of the images you've shot into Blink and step through them one by one and do a quick quality assessment on them. And what we're looking at are the raw files after they've been stretched for a screen stretch so that we can see what's in them. All the files that we're going to be working with are FITS files, and they're linear files. And what that means, if you're familiar with photography and people talk about raw files, basically the data is read directly off the chip and put in a file, and then when you look back at it, the camera or the computer itself will apply a look profile to it, which then gives you the image that you would see, and it looks normal to you, but that's not the data that's behind it. The raw data that's behind it is completely linear in the sense that it hasn't had any kind of stretching or any kinds of alterations to it. So we like working with those because the noise levels are not touched, you know, you're not adding any kinds of histogram stretches or anything, but to be able to work with them, we need to screen stretch them so that we see what's inside them. And I'll show you the differences in a minute. I wanted to start here because I kind of wanted to show you how this works. So I have 380 images already loaded in here. It took about 3 minutes, so I took care of that before everybody got here. And what this does is I can, if you see on the right side over here, I can step through the files, and you don't see much happening in the file on the left just yet, but as I high speed sort of step through it, you can see the center core gets a little better as we go, and then we start jumping around. So what I want to do is those files that don't have very much data inside there, it's flat, has to do with either light pollution or a cloud came in front of the object while I was imaging it, or just for some reason it's not getting through all the way. I'm going to go with light pollution because this was started at around 9 o'clock at night to shoot, and M33, which is what we're working on here, is sitting in a bunch of muck at my house. So as it rose above and came higher and higher in the sky, the signal got better. So I can see that there. So what I'm going to end up doing here is at about 15, I'm going to take the first 14 images like that, and we're going to take them out because we don't want those. So we remove them from this list and then keep going. Now, that's one thing I look for. The other thing I'm going to look for is every time you see these jumping around like that, that's a good chance it's either a meridian flip or the guider fell for a few minutes and then resettled and got into place again and continued imaging. But what I want to look for during when I see those kinds of bumps around is looking for the stars to make sure that they're still round, because sometimes guider errors hit and the stars aren't round anymore. And so I'm just going to scan through. And something to notice also, see over here where a cursor is, where this one star that's right there around that? As I scan through them, you can see it changing size. That's due to seeing. So focus is shifting all the time. So you can see the direct effects of seeing on that one star. And there are other examples in here that get really big. So we're going to step through, because there's a lot of these, and just keep going. See how that star's really big now? So sometimes when they get really big, that's a little out of focus, so I'll take and remove that one, and then keep going. Now, oh, there we go. Now we're getting into some guiding errors. So you can see that's a problem. We don't want that. So we're going to dump that file, and you can see here as we go, oh, there's another one. And these are somehow the guiding got messed up, mount got bumped, the wind blew it, who knows what it is, but you end up with these files. And that's the reason you go through and do a quick quality assessment on the files to make sure what you have is what you want. And so I've kind of done this already, but I wanted to give you a chance to kind of see what the raw files look like as I'm going through them. You can see the different quality as they get better or worse, and there's a few. And every filter is in here too. Like right now I'm on the green. Zoom, boom, 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 boom. Let's go back to that one. So you can see where it's getting a little oblong there. That's still not a problem. You know, we want them as round as possible, but as long as they're not an egg shape, they're going to probably be fine. Because another cool part of PixInsight we'll talk about in a minute here, it can do a quality assessment and add weights to these images so that it will take something that's maybe not the greatest, but it's got some data in it, still use a part of it. Oh, there's a good example of that. So you can see the star got small over here and poofy, but also our data over here gets more intense. So those could be clouds. Hey, there's a bad one. Look at those. Those stars are definitely got a problem. So I would take those out. Once I'm done, I select all of them over here, and I can then click the Move To and save them to another folder within the hard drive. So now what I've got is a list of a folder full of files that I'm happy with and I think are usable. Sometimes I might take a second pass at that because if you've got a lot of files, you might have missed something. So you just look, and I'll do one pass at just watching the stars, make sure that they all stay sort of put together. And then another, I'll try to look at the nebula or whatever I'm shooting to make sure that the data doesn't get too soft inside of it, because that is usually noise or light pollution, and it's just going to create more problems downstream when you get going. So once we've chosen all our images that we're going to use, I go over to scripts and call up this one under batch processing called weighted batch processing. When they introduced this about 4 years ago, it was hallelujah. What this does is it takes all the hard part about calibrating all your files and creating a master light file, weighting the qualities of it, looking at star sizes and figuring out which ones have the best stars and applying all this data to it all in one process. Used to, you'd have to do these steps individually. And one image, I can remember, I could be working on an image for 2 to 4 hours sometimes, just doing all the individual steps for what I wanted to be able to do to it to get it where I liked it. But so, really simple. I can jump in here, get into my calibration files. I got a master bias. I've created a whole bunch of dark files. If you've got all the darks that you've shot off your camera and they're just sitting there, haven't been done nothing with yet, you can apply them all here. It will combine them together to create the master file version of that, and then use the masters in the future. So under darks, I've got my own master files, a master dark for 120 seconds and a master dark for 1 second. The 120-second version is for my light files because they were all shot at 120 seconds each. The 1 second is for my flats because my flat files are all within 1 second or less. So, and those are all located in the same folder here, M33 flats. And I have, so there's basically 24 flat files for each filter, so 72. There it is, laying them all out for us. It knows from the data that's in the metadata that's in the images, those were 0.32 seconds. And there's RGB of all those. Next, I just add my lights. Oh, so let me get the lights in first, then I'll come back to this next part. So in my lights, I've already created a folder called selects. And let's let this load. Scrolling all the way down. Select all of them. There we go. And you can see it sort of populate them all out. Now, back in the day, when we did all this manually and one process at a time, there were settings you could play with and change and blah, 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 all that stuff. And they're still here, but they've just refined how they operate so well. Now they're their standard defaults, and I just leave that alone. I don't change anything. But some of the things, what I'll do is I'll quickly explain a few things. When it combines these bias and dark files, it's basically doing a median merge of combining however many you put together. I recommend 12 to 24 darks, bias files, or anything in there, flat files. You want to have enough for the system to be able to combine it together to give you enough signal-to-noise ratio that's adequate. And I found that. Some people go a lot more. Some people stick around 12, but you don't want to go too much below that because you won't have enough data. So on this right side over here is, so like here under flats, you can see I can change how my flats are integrated, or my lights. I can change a whole lot of things. I can change the weighting formula. So right now it's set for what would be, it expects a nebula to look like. I'm going to change it to galaxy because we are doing a galaxy. And what this does now is it's going to look at the star sizes. I mean, we kind of talked about how star sizing for focus works. I can't think of the process right now, the name of it. But it looks at everything a little bit differently, so that when it's weighting these images of what the high quality image is, it's now thinking I'm looking at a galaxy, so it knows what's going on. But you have other settings you can change. Image registration, which is how all the images are going to get aligned together. It's going to analyze the stars and then make sure that when you combine these images together, that they all are aligned already. And, well, I don't know. It's worked great. I'm not going to touch it. Local normalization, that's something I actually never did as an individual process. what it's doing is it's looking at the signal of each one of the images and making sure they line up in the same place. So if there's one that's way off or in another spot, it's going to try and force it to match the others, as in the signal level, how much signal you have. So if it's really low and brings it up, it's going to bring noise with it up. So you tend to want to just keep it does it really well. It manages it in a nice spot and keeps it and creates an average of the average signal you already have, which is, it has a huge impact that I never realized until I started using this script. And then on image integration, this is how it's going to put them together. And it's going to use an average combination, and the rejection algorithm, I'm going to try to explain what this actually is doing. Windsored sigma clipping with these settings right here. So imagine we were going through Blink and we saw satellite lines run through one image, airplane cross through another, a whole bunch of satellites in another one. What Windsor Sigma clipping does is as it's combining the files together, if a pixel isn't lit in at least 5 frames that it sees, it's going to reject it. And it's going to go to where that pixel isn't lit through the rest of the images, grab those, and fill over the top of it. So it makes airplanes, satellites, anything that moved in the frame disappears. And it's not magic, it's just taking data from other frames that anomaly didn't appear in, and steals it and grabs it and then layers it in other places. So this is how you get rid of all those satellites when everybody's talking about Starlink's going to ruin all our, well, as long as they don't get too many in the way, we'll be able to get rid of them. So that's a big thing, and this is the standard setting, and it works great. It always removes everything. Now, if we make it as far as comment stacking, we'll see the manual process of this, and you have to select it if you want to use it, and you're going to want to. So once this is all done, we got all our frames in, we can come over here and see what's happening in the calibration. Down here's our light frames. We got a whole bunch of those, 120 seconds. There's the number amount of them. We have our flat frames ready to go, and then our darks and everything else, and it's set. Post-calibration is telling us what it's going to have left over. So we got 12 hours and 48 minutes of integration time with this data set. Not bad, not bad. I like to get in that 8 to 12 range. If I go to 20 or 30, it's got to be a deep object, but that's a good level. Especially, this is shot from my house in Palm Desert. There's a lot of light pollution. Pipeline. Hello, it's not showing it. I don't drizzle. It just adds a layer. And so what he's talking about with drizzling, what happens is it's going to take the files right before it stacks them, it's going to double their size, ×2. And then it's going to combine them and then shrink them back down. What it does is gives it a little bit layer of accuracy better, and it also will pick up a little more detail and some stars in places, and it's a nice process. I never gained a whole lot out of it. I get way more out of Blur Exterminator, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So once it's ready to go, you'd hit run, and this diagnostic window would get up here, and then you'd say okay, and it would take off and just go to town. Now, we're not going to do that right now because I have a printout of what that already looked like. It gives you a little report at the end. And that process for that data set took 1 hour and 11 minutes to do all of everything that I would sit there and normally do for 3 hours by manual. I walked away, went and hang out with my dog, did something else while it did all this processing. And as you can see here, we had measurements in here. 384 frames were measured. It took 6 minutes to do that. Then the weights for basically the quality controls for those images were written within 7 seconds. No bad frames were rejected. It selected a reference frame that it used as its point of reference for everything. So all my RGB files are all going to be aligned to the same source, and they'll all just match automatically when I start putting them together. Then it went through and put them all together. So that's what that did. Now, we're going to basically, like a cooking show, I'm going to go over the oven and pull out something I've already cooked. All right, so it's in here, and we're going to go with this one. And once Pixelsight is done with that script for weighted batch processing, it leaves a whole bunch of folders. You're going to end up with this calibrated folder. You're going to end up with logs. You're going to end up with masters. You're going to end up with weights. and these others are stuff that I add. So under masters is where all the goodies are. In here, anything that you've had it combined in that run shows up. So all my master flat files are in here. And if we were to just look at one real quick, you could see, well, yeah, that's a flat file. That's exactly what they're supposed to look like. And that's a master. If I was going to continue imaging with the current optical setup like that, I could save these and use them again. But I'm after these light frames, which are RGB. Now, as you see them pop in here, they're all black. This is them in their linear state. I have to do a screen stretch function to show us what that looks like. Now, if I pop open, just to give you an example so you kind of know what we're looking at here, and as we go down the road here, you're going to see this a little bit better too. Which one did I do? The R. All right, R. You can see that little peak that's right there. That's all the signal that makes up that image on the left. It's not a whole lot. And it's really down on the left side, which if you look at the histogram here, I'll try to just, this line right here that's going across the bottom right here, this left side represents the darkness. The right side is the brightness. So highlights live on the right side and the blacks live on the left. What's in the middle is your midtones or your gammas, as they would be called. We'll get into these a little bit more in a little while, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what that signal looked like on there, and that it's really in the basement. So we're going to take each one of these images and do a quick screen stretch. And as you notice, when they pop up like there, you can see that really bright gradient off to the sides, and it never comes from the same angle. And that is, the angle has nothing really to do with other than maybe when it was on the other side of the meridian, you got more light pollution and another. But what that is the light pollution. That is what gets in our way and makes our pictures ugly. Now, normally what I do here is I'll treat each one of these files independent and start trying to remove the light pollution on it. But I thought I would try and do this a little different tonight, because I used to do this as well with color images. So if you're starting with a CFA image already, all I need to do is combine these three really quickly, and I'll have the same thing, and then we'll be working from the same workflow forward. It pretty much should be the exact same workflow. It won't change anything, because the only thing I do at this point before I combine them is try to minimize that light pollution gradients that are in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to combine these files, and that is another little process over here. Now, everything that I have kind of lined up over here, you can save these presets inside PixInsight as your favorites. They're all from the different things that are buried inside here. And trust me, like I said, we're barely going to scratch the surface of this program. If you're into the science aspects of this and we're chasing exoplanets, doing all kinds of things, this has the tools to do the measurements that you need to do. It's really an extensive piece of software. It's not cheap either. It's somewhere in that $300 range. But they do have a 30-day free trial, so you can play with it and see what you like. All right, so let's see, this is green, so I'm going to take and put that in the G spot. Ooh. Filter B, go here. And it does have multiple ways you can do this. I could hit a button on the right side and it'll show me all the files and I just pick it. But I find I feel comfortable putting them all in like that. Leaving these open, now we got our sources set and it's an RGB file. We're going to tell it to go ahead and execute. And as again, it's black because we're linear. So we'll do a screen stretch and, ooh, not that pretty. I'm going to go ahead and close these other masters because we don't need them anymore. We've just taken all the data from all three of these files and combined them into this one file. It is not being, it's not a Bayer matrix or anything at this point. We're looking at 3 times the size of the file. It's got all 3 channels, 100% of everything that was in those individual files. Now, let's go back and look at that histogram again. And because it's so low, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And so you can see how our color channels are not quite lined up. They're not, they're a little mismatchy. So this has to do with the different amounts of signal that each filter collected. So I got a little more green, then I got red. So what I need to do at this point is, in the past, I would be sitting here inside histogram transformation, trying to go through, change the red a little, move it so that it lines up with the green a little better, and you sit there for I don't know how long just to get it close. Then comes auto color. I'm going to reset the settings for the histogram, and so I select my image, come up under scripts, and it just happens to be under utilities, auto color. This is free. So what it's doing is it's actually analyzing and figuring out where the intensity of each color channel ends up, and then on the left side is the background, or the black areas. It figures out how much space is between all of those things, and then it's going to adjust them, linear fit them together so that they average out, and so the colors are as equally red RGB as possible, at least in the same position. It doesn't change their intensities, but it puts them in their balance position. And color balance has a lot to do with a black point and a white point, and what we see, and how your eyes interpret that. There we go. So, boom, boom, boom. And once it's done, we're still in a linear situation. So I want to reset. Where is it? Oh, here we go. My screen stretch. And there we are. Now, you can still see all those gradients that we were dealing with before. So how do we flatten this image out a little bit so that it's not as green on the bottom and as purpley on the top? Going to use another tool inside PixSite, because we're here a lot tonight, called dynamic background extraction. And what that does is kind of magical. I don't know how it does it. But I create a shortcut here that sort of gets me started, and I'll show you there's only 2 places we got to adjust numbers or make any changes. The default setting that it pops up here under tolerance is 0.8 and shadow relaxation 2. These other settings, I never change them. They're not the default ones. Maybe smoothing factor is, but I chose the default sample radius and sample rows and sample weight because I experimented a bunch and I never really saw much of a difference on those. But once you open this up, you have to generate its sample points. So when I hit the generate button, it looks like it pretty much populated all my sample points all the way around. When I do my single files, it doesn't do this. So I'm going to make a few changes here because I want to show you the process here for this. 1.2, and we're going to take this one down to 0.6. Generate. There we go. If you notice, not all the points are filled in. So the idea here is, I've only kind of figured this out from an enormous amount of experimenting. I don't know why they impact the way it does. There are manuals, and you can sit here and hold this over, and it comes up with a nice description of what it's doing here. But I'm not a sciencey guy. I'm more an artsy guy, and have learned from just repetition on trying to find that setting. So what I have found when I start at 0.8 and at 2 is I can then, what I want to do is, I want these 2 sets of numbers to be as low as possible, but populate all my sample points as far across the image as possible without covering my target as much. So you can see in the middle here, the target itself is fairly clean. It doesn't have anything on it. But over in these edges, I want those to be sampled. So that's when I will start making adjustments. I'd like having my shadow relaxation as low as possible, and then start with the tolerance. So 8, go to 8.8, and then I hit generate. Ooh, getting closer. Let's go to 0.9. And remember, I don't normally do this to an RGB file, so we're all learning this together. Let's go whole number 1. Yeah, pretty good. I don't mind leaving, so you can see kind of over here on the left side, there's not one there. And up in the top right side, there's not one there. To me, that's a good threshold. Just 1 or 2 not there will do it. Will probably have the best impact. If you go too far, what ends up happening is it takes too much of the background out and everything goes black in chunky spots. Maybe we'll just do one for just to see it. But anyway, so we execute that. It's going to pop up a new file that it has now gone through and tried to take out as much of the light pollution as it could. Ooh, better. Way better. Now we just have a little bit of a green cast I see down at the bottom. The purple is starting to recede at the top right side, and we're doing pretty good there. So, because this is a dynamic type of process inside here, it's locked to the image that we're processing right now, so I have to actually close it to make it go away. And I'm going to just throw this one away. I'm not going to keep that. So I'm done with that one, and I've got this new one. Sometimes I'll do this 2 and 3 times until I'm happy with what I got. Hit that DBE process again. This time the numbers are different. And let's process it and see if it made it better. All right, have a look. I think that's a winner right there. And that's 2 irradiation, 2 rounds of hitting it with DBE. Now we've just got kind of a little bit of a gradient at the bottom. The sections, in fact, this, because I've been practicing with this image, this is actually the best I've had it come out yet. So far at this point. Normally I got a little bit of a purple, well, maybe there is a little one in there, the light's up there. No, that looks pretty good. I'm actually very happy with the way that's looking. So we're gonna toss that, and we're gonna remove that one. I don't need it anymore. Now, there's still a little bit of gradient down here. This is where we're gonna call up Graxpert. I don't like to start with this tool because I find that it wants to just kind of even everything out. And so if you have a lot of light pollution, it's just going to kind of push the light pollution across the whole image. So it's one of the last things I do. I like to use the dynamic background extraction to get started with removing all that light pollution that's in there. And then when I got just a few little things left, I'll throw Graxpert at it. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes it really trashes the image. I'm not sure why. But you try it. If it makes an improvement, you go with it. And it does its own background extraction. So Graxpert is an AI tool as well. It's been trained on trying to recognize what a gradient looks like against way better, a flat image. So it's been trained to try and understand how a gradient affects an image and what it looks like against the data that's sitting there. And my goodness, did it do a just amazing job there. The bottom, we're way better than where we started. So that's done. We're going to put Graxpert away and move to the next step. And this is where we get into some of the magic that I can't explain a whole lot. So once I get to this point, I like to save this file in case I need to come back to it again one day. And I do not save it in the master. I'll put it in something called work files because that seems obvious. And it's not all that. It's M33. Oops, not 223s. And this is linear dash RGB. Work files. And I'm not going to save a TIFF. That's because the last thing I did was export to a TIFF. I'm going to save to XISF. What that is a updated FITS file. FITS has been depreciated. In other words, it doesn't carry as much data as they'd like to have in astronomical images anymore, as far as metadata and all that kind of stuff. So XISF is the new FITS. It's a new standard. Thank the science community for that. But so as you can see, as I'm saving it, it does give you a lot of options. I could save as a 64-bit file, but it's always going to offer me the highest resolution that I'm at right now, which is 32-bit floating point. So we're going to save at that level, and now let's go to the next thing. So the next thing I like to do at this point is when I pull out the RC Astro tools. I'm still linear, so a lot of your image manipulation stuff that you want to do it in a linear mode before you get into nonlinear, because if you introduce noise, if you introduce it at the linear level, it's much lower and can be dealt with much simpler. So we stick to the linear mode until we stretch up, and we're only a few steps away from that. In fact, if it wasn't for what the 2 things I'm going to do next, we'd be doing it already. So what Blur Exterminator does, and sometimes it works out of the gate for me, we'll see if it does. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, deconvolution. Is that correct? Thank you. It's a funny word when you read it. What deconvolution does is it takes a point source format. Yay, it did it. A point source light. So a star is a point source of light. A single, it radiates from a single point. And it analyzes all your star or a group of stars panel by panel and figures out how the atmospheric distortion as well as any last lingering optical imperfections that may exist inside your stars, and then it goes in and reshapes them. Now, I used to do this manually, and this was a process that it's never perfect and it's hard and you couldn't do it great, but somebody trained an AI model how to know how to do this. And as you saw, that was drag and drop. And I'll show you the before and after parts because it's just phenomenal. I'm always blown away by this part right here. So before, after. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Sorry. Let's get close in there. There we go. I wanted Y. Before. I'm going too far back now. There we go. So it not only affects the stars, it understands how your optical image may have been misshaped by the atmosphere. And you can notice in the part of the galaxy, it's affecting the galaxy as well in its sharpness and in its regions. So it's not adding a sharpening filter. What we're doing is we're correcting for abnormalities and what shouldn't be in the image to begin with. So that's deconvolution. It's the best way I can describe it. There's scientifically, there's a whole lot more going on there, but that's as simple as I can make it. And as you can see, it not only just makes your stars really kind of nice and tight, it sharpens up all these other regions that are inside the nebula here, or inside the galaxy. And I am heavily zoomed in here, and you can see the differences as it in the dark channels. You see how the dark little lanes become more prevalent. You can actually tell they're there. Truly magical tool. And it's not cheating. Don't ever think we're at a point where we're going to be diving into the hard side of this a little bit, and all we're doing is we're removing imperfections that happened in the capturing process. So that's looking great. The next step now is another little trick that we'd mask all the stars and create and remove them, or create the mask around the stars but leave the nebula parts alone as best you could, so that you could process the actual galaxy elements or nebula elements separate from your stars, because sometimes there's a lot more data that's underneath there that you want to show up, but by doing that you push your stars over the top and you oversaturate them. So the idea is you would protect your stars and then adjust the background or adjust any of the other parts of the image. But think to this tool right here. It goes a little further than that. It does create that mask, but to make that mask, it actually analyzes the entire image and knows what the star is supposed to be, and then separates them from the background image. So we create a second image, and you see it's processing. It's about a third of the way there. You end up with two images, one that's the stars and one that's not the stars. And when you get into some really interesting nebulas and stuff, and maybe on the second image we'll see this a little more, to see them without stars is quite fascinating. And it does such a good job. It leaves everything there. It's just there's no stars. So here we go. We got our stars there, and because of M33 has a lot of detail to it, and there's a lot of fine points. Parts of M33 get captured up into it that it thought was stars because they are fine points within it. That's going to be fine. It won't matter. But there's M33 without stars. And it does a really good job. Sometimes it leaves one or two behind, and that's okay. But most of this is everything but the stars. And we can get in here and see all the different nebulous regions that are inside of M33. Is that a second galaxy in the behind? I can't tell. Maybe. So now that we've got these images, it's time to save again. Because a lot of times what I like to do is once I'm done processing it, I put it away, come back and look the next day. And a lot of times I'm like, I did too much color, too much of this, too much of that. because you step away from them and you come back with some fresh eyes. So I leave chunks, I save at stages to where now if I'm going to come back and redo this tomorrow, I'll come back to this image and not the rest of everything else I've already done. So we got linear, RGB. Oh, I forgot which image I was actually saving. Okay, the no stars. RGB, no stars. And then this one we're going to save as our stars. But I wanted to have the right name. All right, we're done with this one for now. And we can put away Star Exterminator. Now we're ready to go linear. We have it looks like an enormous amount of our light pollution is gone. This has really turned out well this time. And like I said, this is the third time I've run through this data, and it's the best one yet. So what you do to bring it linear? First, we turn off the screen stretch, black, and you jump over here to that histogram transformation. And this is simple, actually. Again, this is the black areas on the left, mids in the center, and the highlights in the top. I pick my image that I'm going to be adjusting, and I turn on preview, because I want to see the effect that I'm making. It previews this little circle down here. To stretch a regular image, all I do is I grab the gammas, that mid-tone, and I just start pushing it down. And as you can see, it's coming up a little bit there in the center, but it's hard to get down there because so I'm gonna change the settings for the view so I can see that histogram as I get in there. And the idea is I just want to bring it up, and I'm gonna leave it milky like that. I'm not really looking at, this is not where I'm starting to get critical about contrast or anything. I definitely want to leave signal behind. And so if you look at the histogram up at the top up here, this signal that's to the left here is the area where blacks would live. And our signal is well above it. So we're not crushing anything. We're not clipping anything. We have a nice, easy curve up and down. There's no clipping happening yet. So we're not losing any signal is what's important here. If I took and got aggressive with it now, you can see how I start clipping stuff. And yeah, that looks pretty good, but there's data back there. There's actually part of that image that is still there. So I want to keep it. So I will only bring up the blacks or the shadows and still leave a good little gap there. And, this is to taste a little bit. With this light in front of me, I'm not sure how much I'm getting, but I'm going to just sort of guess it out. Because I'm going to leave, like I said, the background's going to stay a little bit milky. Turn off the preview. Go ahead and execute that. And reset this, because you come back and forth to histogram a lot. All right, close the preview window, and now what we have is our galaxy in a linear format. And as you saw in the histogram, the signal was much more prominent. It wasn't buried down in that left channel on that left side. So now comes the art. All those are pretty much, well-defined. You'd kind of grab this, put a number or two, see if it does something, and then you react. Here, everything else from here is to the eye. And basically, we're going to season to taste. I'm going to make this a little bigger because it's always funner when it's bigger. There we go. And all I do for this is I just head over to curves. Now, the idea here is I'm going to make it as best I can, and then if I find some things that I want to tweak a little bit, I'm not doing them here. I'm just trying to get it to what this tool set can make it the best. Any kind of fine-tuning is going to happen in Lightroom in a little bit. So idea here now is I want to get as much of that image with as a decent of a black background, but still see everything that's there. Just like histogram, the left side's the shadow, the right side's the highlights. So, but instead of having those particular, just those three elements we can adjust, we can create our own points here. And so what I like to do is I'll start with the down and near the shadows. I'll kind of just click there on that thing, and you can see how it added a point. Then I'll click that and drag it to the bottom right. Oh, hold on, I messed up. Turn on preview. Now we can see what I'm doing. So I've dragged this to the side there. You can see how the blacks are coming down. If I want to turn it up, you can see, what direction, what does what. I recommend anytime you're doing anything like this, shake it up. move it around, see what you like. So here I just want to start with trying to get the blacks kind of close to black, but not black. Then I'm going to come up here just a little higher and reverse that so that I bring some of the brightness back up to everything that's there, and I might pull that higher there. And then add back a little black. You can see how it sort of teeter-totters as you move one around. So you can affect that. Now we're going to just kind of keep clicking as we go. And like I said, click and drag them. You can see where I'm adjusting is just that middle section. And each one of these points I'm doing is affecting a different range of brightness within the image. So like up there, you can see how that's more of the core. But as I get here and here, that is the core. And get way up here, you can see how it gets smaller and smaller, the brighter sections. So the idea here is this is how you would bring back any kind of the faint, wispy stuff that's on the outside and make it brighter, sort of an HDR. What we're going to do is lift the stuff that's not as bright, try not to create more haze, but also keep the balance of that image. And like I said, this is where you season to taste. You just kind of experiment. And you can see where I'm affecting it there, just a little bit. And it tends to be, the more smooth of a curve you end up with, tends to be the ones that work. So brightness there a little bit, and getting up here a little bit. Maybe a little less here, because I want those blacks to start creeping in a little. Never crush to black. And you'll see why. Once we put the stars back in there, even though space is dark, it's never black, ever. There's always something there, even if it's just a teeny bit of something. There's always something there. There's always a background level. If you have to crush to the black to hide imperfections, that means we had a problem with light pollution or a flat field problem or whatever. As you can see, the uniformity of the image that's important, the center, 80% of it, is all pretty much the same balance and luminance around it. Let's see, okay. That's looking pretty good. I think I can go with that. Turn off the preview. Let's see here. You can see where we started. Getting somewhere. Now, while we're still here, over here on the right side, so we've basically just stuck with all the channels. If there was a problem with one of the channels here, we could get in here and start manipulating RG, all the different color channels. But that's usually a problem where you've had something in already, a gradient that you didn't get rid of or anything like that. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go over here to this S button, which is for saturation. If you're working in other color spaces, lab and different components, you do have those controls here, but we stick to RGB here. Like I said, this program does so much. It's got, just can do a lot of things. So I'm going to get over here to the saturation. It's a straight line. It's the same thing. If I want the color and the bright sections to be high, I would grab it up high. If I want them bright in the shadows, I would grab it here. I tend to start about 3/4 of the way up and then just start turning it up until we start seeing the color kick in. That curve, as you notice the line here, that is part of that, the more you push it out of view, that's oversaturating. So it's a good chance you've pushed the color too far at that point. So I like to leave it to where it just hugs up against the bottom of that current. And then just to see what happens, I'm going to add some color to the shadows. So you can see we're adding a lot of green, right? So I don't know that we need that much color, because green is important too. It's a part of the color white. Without green, it's difficult to get white. So maybe here's where we can do a little bit of a tweak in that green channel. I'm just going to grab it in the middle, pull it away a little. Oh, that's much more pleasant. That's looking pretty good. And I do see that little purple haze in the top right corner, but we'll deal with that in Lightroom. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? I think that's a good one. We'll go with that. Execute with the square. Now that that's done, I reset all these parameters that I had in curves, because I come back around to it all the time. Put it away, turn off the preview, and there's our image that we have so far. So I'm going to set this to the side because we're done with it at this point. And let's open back our stars. All right. So this image is still nonlinear. We haven't stretched it up yet. So turn off the screen stretch and open up histogram transformation. And I'm going to tell it I want the stars, and it should have it already. Turn on preview. There we go. So this is where I do it a little differently. And it has to do with just sort of taste, nothing else. So the other image, I took and just grabbed the midtones right there, the gammas, and I stretched there. And that's the only adjustment I made. With stars, I kind of like them to be fine, hard points, but with a little softness on the outside. If I just did the gamma stretch, they would have a very soft sort of surface to them. They never would have a hard point. So I'm going to actually take the highlights and push them, and you'll see them get brighter, and I put it down to here, just that far. That's as far as I go. So what I've done is I've taken the cores of them and made them a little more solid. Instead of a soft, fuzzy star, I'm going to have a solid defined star, but with a soft edge if it's bigger. So now that I've just pushed the highlights to that point, I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of my stretch with the gammas. And then I'm basically, again, this is more salt and pepper to taste. And I just kind of keep moving it until I think, that's enough stars. Ooh. Cool thing here is once I combine them, I can still make an adjustment for them if I think they're too much. So I'll go over just a little bit. So we'll call that stars, and we'll go ahead and turn off the preview and then hit the execute. And I'll go ahead and reset. So there's our stars. And then here's our galaxy. Let's get them back together. So to do that, use a function called pixel math. Now, if anybody's ever composited stuff in Photoshop, basically what we're doing is we're doing a transfer mode. We're going to combine one image with another equally together, and the fact that the stars have a solid black background, that's how the program knows that that's the transparent part. That's the part we're not going to show in the next image we combine. So you can do this in Photoshop. You could save these out as TIFFs and then head straight to there and do that. But I found a really simple formula using pixel math, and you can see what it is here. This is my default, what I save as the formula. I need to edit it to the real names of the files that are in front of us. So opening expression editor, all I do is highlight the one that says no stars, and that's my image with no stars. Double click it. This is in the formula where the stars go, and I add the stars, and then I say, okay, now what I do is I need to apply that math. This is the formula. Drag and drop, and voila, stars. Now, wow, that looks really good. I'm liking this a lot. But say I went, oh, too much stars. Simple, just undo. Open, come over here and look at your stars image again. And I'm going to just kind of hide that away. I don't have a whole lot of screen real estate here to work with. And I open up curves. And I got that selected. And I open up the preview. And I choose my RGBK. And now I just want to reduce the stars a little bit. I just kind of grab it in the middle and pull it to the right. And you can see how the stars, get less and less. I can make it, pick a spot. Let's say, yeah, okay, right about there. Execute it, and then reset it, put it away. I already have my pixel math. I can come over here and all I've done is change that one file, but none of the names have changed, so I can now just drag and drop that again. And there it is with that lower stars not as intense. I'm thinking that's pretty good. Oh, I forgot something. Yeah, so as you see as I zoomed in, he spotted it too. You can see sort of this sort of crispy, colored, multicolored noise that's there. I prefer, now you can do this at any point, to do my noise reduction before I add my stars, because the stars aren't really creating noise. They're fine points of light already. So they don't, if you over-process noise reduction, you can remove stars. So that's why I tend to do it. But the tool I use for noise reduction, which is the noise exterminator from RC Astro, it tends to, you could drab it on here and it wouldn't be a problem, but I'm going to go ahead and pull them out, and I'm going to Go ahead and apply this. Now this is another AI tool. It's been trained to understand what noise looks like. So it's going to go in, analyze the image real quick, and then apply noise reduction. And this is magic. This is one of the best. I mean, Topaz does a great job, but it's not as good as this. I've actually come in here with some of my low light photos for work and used it. But you can see what I've done here. You can see how the haze that's over that, and I apply it, and it removes that haze. And it's basically just taking out that noise without removing data from the signal. So you can see all now our different nebulas and stuff that are inside there. Now that I've done the noise reduction, let's put those stars back in there. Boom. And then you can get in there and look. And this is my favorite part, is just pixel peeping, digging around in here and seeing all these, like there's the Orion Nebula that lives inside of M33. And over here is another one. And the detail that we're actually getting, you know, it looks a little soft there, but I'm also zoomed in like 300% right now. There's a lot of smooth data here, and you can see the detail that's these dark channels, you know, that run through M33. You really get a chance to explore these and all the different, you know, there's hydrogen glowing there, and this is RGB. Where were we? We were 12 hours, I think. And this is a Bortle 7 sky in Palm Desert. Not bad. Usually I don't image RGB because it's difficult to clean the noise up or the light pollution, but I needed to have an example for us here today, and I'm digging that. I don't know that there's a whole lot more I need to edit this. So the next thing is you save. And this will be part of, there we go, and it's going to be just straight M33 RGB, and I'm going to call it V3 because this is my third array, and this will be the one I publish. Save it as an XISF, so if I ever want to come back to it and tweak it. And our stars, I could save this, but I got the same thing already in nonlinear, which, you know, lets me adjust, or sorry, not nonlinear, linear, so I don't really need it, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that away. And then now that we got this, it's already saved as XISF. I need to create a file that will drop into either Photoshop or Lightroom, because that's where I like to do my final little tweaks in critical color. And they don't like astronomical files, so I'm going to save this as a TIFF. TIFF is, you could use JPEG, PNGs, any of those files that are in here. Issue with those, though, they're lossless. They have compression applied to them, whereas a TIFF file is not compressed unless you tell it to compress. Now, save it as a TIFF. This time, though, I could save it as a 32-bit TIFF, but that's kind of overkill. Where we're headed right now is 16-bit land, so I'm going to go ahead and save it as is, and it's going to do the bit conversion right out of PixInsight. So it's saving a 16-bit TIFF, and we are done with that file. Next thing I like to do is take that file over here, and it's so small. Where's Lightroom? There it is. So if you've used Lightroom, it's pretty straight ahead to get a file in here. I go to the library, import, and go to my file. That's in here. Oh, got to select that folder. There we go. Yeah, I wonder if it'll let me move it. Done. There we go. Or okay, it is importing it. Hello? Did it not? Yeah, but that's, I think, the file I did earlier. I don't think it imported it. There we go. I didn't click the right button. There it is. All right, we're going to drop it in here into my collection so that I got it with all my other astro pictures. Yeah, pretty. I love those. I don't know, that's why I do it. I love the color. I love just the diving into them, everything about it. So here we have it inside Lightroom. I head over to develop, and this is weird because earlier, oh, it's because we had to reshape my desktop for the, let me just get this so we can see all the tools. All right, so now we've got this in Lightroom. First thing I like to do is go and crop it. I tend to keep everything that 4x5 shape, but I want to get a little smaller, closer to it, because I like the image scale better so that it looks bigger in the image. And so there's the crop. For texture, you know, these are all, again, seasoned to taste. I put like a little 10 here for clarity and texture, just to add a little more pop to the sharpness that's there. Not a lot, but you can sit here and you can adjust these and up and down, and you can put it wherever you like. And then I'll use the dehaze. Now, I haven't done any color correction yet, because this tends to do a few things that I would do up here with the shadows and blacks. So once I got there, and then dehaze. So you can see how that can add contrast. And you can see my histogram at the top, how the signal gets lower to the left, the blacks become more black. So I just want to adjust this a little bit, because here's where I'm going to make my blacks as black as I want them. Let's see if I can get this in closer a little bit. You can see it's black, but there's still a little bit of something there. It's never truly black, black. All right, now I can come up here in shadows. You can see how they're affecting it, and you can adjust as much. If you want a brighter image, you can do that. More contrast. I tend to stick to like these things, the highlights and the shadows, but they tend to not really need any adjustment. And then, how much color do we want? Don't need a whole lot. This one's actually got a lot of really good color. Hey, wow, interesting. And I'm just kind of sliding them back and forth and watching the changes, and then going, okay, that works. Now, sometimes if you get left with a gradient of some sort, and this happens in narrowband imaging a lot, I end up with a heavy magenta cast over the whole thing, and sometimes I can't get rid of it in PixInsight. So once I get over here, you see how we have that excess green again. It's still kind of sitting on us a little bit. Under Color Mixer here, this is where I like to go and actually just hit that color. So that color, I can either go to the green and go just less of it. I don't want to see as much of it. And I can then also change that color of that green to something else and have it not be as bright. And you can see how when I wiggle it hard, how the sections that are popping up and down there glowing. But like I said before, you need a little green to make white. So, and let's warm it up a little more. Let's add that orange section in the middle, try to hit that a teeny bit. The blues are really pretty, so I'm going to kind of push them a little, just a teeny bit. And so you can see it's very subtle. I don't know if you can see the difference. It's extremely subtle. But, you know, what I've really done is caused a lot of those hydrogen areas within, and the deepening of those channels that are inside the actual galaxy there. You can see the detail, and we can dive in even further and just explore it a lot. It's what I like to do. And at this point, I'm done. Export. I make sure I got my watermark. And then there it is. I didn't think that was going to take a whole hour. Sorry, guys. But we could talk about it a little bit more. This, no matter if it's RGB or if it's narrowband, the same process applies. It's a little different. Since we don't have something going on out in the observatory tonight, I'm going to not show the entire process for a narrowband image, but I'm going to show you a few things that can happen and how to get the Hubble palette out of your narrowband image. Is that okay back there? Maybe 20 minutes more? No complaints. Thank you. All right. Yes, sir.
You mentioned linear a lot, and you mentioned stretch. Could you define those two a little more?
So linear is the state of the image file. When I say linear, it's the original raw levels that came out of the camera. So it has not had a stretch applied to it, which is like the histogram. So a screen stretch is basically like hitting the auto button on a processing. You know, you want to see a pretty picture? Auto. It will try and create the levels of the image so that it appears in front of you in an expected way. So the difference between linear and stretch is one's a file type and the stretch is the process. So when we're linear, we stretch to get it to nonlinear. So nonlinear is we've compressed the data so that it becomes more visible within that same space. Area. Space might be the wrong word. So linear and nonlinear, that's the difference. Raw file, not a raw file. So like when you take a picture with your phone, it doesn't save, well, some of them do now, raw, but it's applying a picture profile to the data that compresses and does an automatic stretch, all in your phone. So what we're doing is we're trying to process the data before it's had that kind of manipulation to it.
So in essence, linear is raw.
Correct.
Stretch is processed.
Correct.
Okay.
That is exactly correct. So I was going to kind of walk through all of these for, I got to go back further, for a narrowband image, but we're going to just jump into some of my work files already, because we have them here. So on this particular image that we're about to process, I shot both narrowband and RGB together, a bunch of it. The reason for this is narrowband stars are ugly, and you can recover them and make them pretty, but they never look like what the stars are natural. A person that would never know would, that's just looking at the images, you can hide it pretty good, but the stars won't be their natural color. So I shoot RGB for the stars, and I shoot narrowband for the nebula. And because I can separate them cleanly like that, I can also recombine them separately. Yeah?
Does that just mean that you're shooting mono, but you're shooting RGB,
Uh-huh.
and then you're shooting narrowband, so you're using narrowband filters with your mono camera?
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. So on my mono camera, I have 7 filters. One of them is clear. It's basically infrared UV block, but it's meant to let just the entire luminance of the image in. And then there's R, red, green, blue, hydrogen alpha, sulfur 2, and oxygen 3. And hydrogen alpha, and oxygen 3, and sulfur are very small slices of light. And what they basically are the emission lines of something that's glowing in the sky. So hydrogen glows red in the hydrogen area. So we're going to pick up just the hydrogen alpha strip. And then over here, we're going to pick up just the sulfur 2 strip part of that emission line, which is kind of tealish. Well, actually, oxygen 3 is more teal. They don't line up like a red, green, blue image. They don't. They're not quite that balanced out. But we create we repalette them together. And the Hubble palette, it's called, because it was made famous by that first image of the Pillars of Creation, M16, that just highly contrast, really bold image. And that's what narrowband imaging gives you, is a much more high contrast image, because you're not as susceptible to light pollution, because you're actually imaging slices of light that light pollution doesn't fall in a lot. Mercury vapor being a lot of source of light pollution. Now we got more LEDs out, so you get a lot more bluer lights, but mercury vapors are all kind of golden yellowish. That's a particular emission line, the mercury vapor emission line. So that's where that color comes from. So you can filter those out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out here. We're going to open up my SHO with no stars. We'll start there. And so what this is all I've done here is took my sulfur, hydrogen, oxygen images, applied some light pollution gradient removal to them so that it would help not have that issue. Light pollution still leaks in. It's there, but it's just not as bad. And then I combined them all together, and then you get this image. So right now that's nonlinear. So what I need to do, linear. This is a linear image. If I turned off the screen stretch, you'd see it's dark. There's not much there. We're going, and I've already applied the sharpening, the blur, exterminator and star exterminator. So let's make this a linear image. Histogram. Try and haul butt through this. Seems sometimes like, why can't you just copy what the screen stretch did? And you can, but sometimes it crushes the blacks a little bit too far. Because when you're first bringing an image up from linear to nonlinear, you can actually damage it. If you blow out the highlights or if you crush the blacks too much at that point, they're gone. You'd have to go back to a previous version of the file. So once you clip those elements, they don't come back. So you would have to process the rest of your image without them. I think that's pretty good right there. I'll just go with that. It's now a nonlinear image. And if let me put this back to 1 here. So I wonder if I could just, okay, so here's a great example. So seeing the histogram, let's see here, boom. Oh, darn it. I was hoping I could do an undo. Go back. There we go. So you can see this is as a linear image where the signal was, and then that's nonlinear anymore. You can see how the signal has been increased. What I've done is I've basically stretched that element that's deep in the, not a whole lot there and is barely visible. I turned up the volume is the best way I could describe it. And now it's a nonlinear image. So moving forward, so we got that one. We're going to just set it aside. No. Let's not set it aside. Now to achieve the Hubble palette, it's not very green. And what you're seeing all this green from is because when the Hubble palette, the way it works is RGB, I'm putting sulfur in the R channel, I'm putting hydrogen alpha in the green channel, and I'm putting oxygen 3 in the blue channel. So the brightest thing in space is that hydrogen channel, and it's now being represented as green. So that's why it's so green. I can manually keep tweaking to bring out the green and lower it down to where it becomes manageable, but I don't want to lose the value of the luminance that's there that's part of the green channel. So I just want to take green out so it's not as intense, but leave the brightness that where it lived. So here we have another tool called SCNR. I wish I knew what that stood for. I could tell you right now. But it's basically a way to go in and affect any one of your RGB channels. It's not RGB, but I have my green channel, which is what I need to reduce. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to preserve lightness, and I'm going to take out as much green as possible on an average. And so I hit it with that. Now we have the Hubble palette. One quick step. I could go through curves and tweak it and blah, blah, and eventually get there, but there it is in one quick step. So now we are on to curves, and you remember how this works. We're going to start with our blacks, bring down some start adding some contrast or brightness. Now, the galaxy is, you don't see the levels as much as here. Here I can grab this and you can see how much it's affecting the surrounding section. And what it is the part of the curves that I'm grabbing, that's the level of brightness there. It's not the highlights, it's sort of the midtones. So I'm keeping my shadows in a pretty good spot, but I'm kicking up the highlights more and more. So the highlights say right here, and seeing this section right there where this really bright part is, right down here, that is your highlights. If I push those way up, you can see how they accent that. And I can create some very interesting ridges, but I'm also clipping my data there. So I don't want to go that far. So I'm going to just sort of tweak this up. You can see how I'm affecting just different sections. I like seeing all the extra that comes up when I start kicking that up, but it's also adding that magenta tint. So there we go. Let's see here. Yeah, there's their contrast. So over here on this far left side, there's this section right here. It looks like it should go to black pretty quick. There's not any data there, but I don't want it to go to black. Like I said, there's no black in space. It's all got something there. So we just want it to have enough of a difference so that we see the shading across it. And these outside edges are likely to get cropped away too. And usually I found any color problems because of artifacts from stacking. If you can see on the right side here, this is where the images weren't, when I shot them, they didn't all line up. But once they were all lined up, the edge of some of the images did not meet the far right side. So you get these sort of artifacts. That's normal. That'll happen. Like I said, the outside edge is going to get cropped. So now we got our luminance kind of set there. You can see where we started. And that's pretty contrasty. I like that. Let's add some color. Ooh, not bad. And you can see that magenta cast is happening all over the image, but especially on the outside edges. So if I were to increase the saturation in the shadow portions, you really see it. See how those really got purple fast. So I want to minimize that a little bit, but I also want to have some color in the lower sections, so in the darker segments. So we'll pick some here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now, also, I'm not done. I'm just kind of getting it closer and closer to where my final image will be, because I'm leaving room for adjustments later. I'm going to go with that. Drop that in. Reset that. Put it away. And we're done with that image for now. And stars, RGB stars, linear RGB stars. And that's what the stars look like in that segment, that place, that part of the sky. Just to give you an idea what it looks like, SHO stars. Oops, nope. Oh, that's no stars, the original image I'm working with. I didn't know it could open another iteration of that. Huh. You know what? I probably didn't save it. Nope, I didn't. Sorry. So what I can do, though, is I can open up this. And you see how the purple the stars are? This is what I was talking about. SHO stars are ugly. They tend to be heavily magenta, and to fix them, you have to use that SCNR tool, invert the stars by themselves. It's a process, but if you can do it, shoot RGB stars, and you won't ever have to worry about that. So here we are, RGB stars, and it's a linear image that we have to bring forward, so we're going to quickly stretch it up, select the stars, turn on the preview, get this back to 1 here so I can see everything. I'm going to grab my highlights because I like my stars to be a little edgy, and then kick that up to the point of, like, this time, woo, too far. That's why we need to kind of adjust the scale so you can see down here, because we're really at the bottom of where the data lives. Let's keep them kind of minimized. There we go. And just from doing it a bunch, that's just kind of where I get my feel for that kind of thing. Now, on these stars, I might want to go a little further and add a little more color to them. So I hit my curves, go to saturation, turn on preview, and turn it up. So you can see how warm the stars have gotten. Maybe not that much. There we go. All right, process. Close all that, open this back up, and go to pixel math. It's still got the same formula in there before, so I got to make the changes. This was no stars in the front. And here is stars. Drop it on there, and voila, stars are back. Ooh, not too bad, not too bad. All right. I didn't do noise reduction again. I already tossed my stars, so we're going to go ahead and just use the noise reduction right on there with the stars, because I want to get in and show you how to real quickly remove that magenta cast and finish it in Lightroom. So I'm just going to apply it. And if you notice, it didn't hurt the stars. Come on. Did I undo? Yeah, why? Looks pretty clean, like I did do the color. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay, so there was so much signal inside the middle of the image, you don't see the noise because the signal's fairly high, but out here you can see the noise and how I got rid of it. And didn't affect any stars. All right. Save as. Yeah, it's a little chilly. And make a TIFF. (16-bit). Put that away. Close that because we're saved. And hide this. Head over to Lightroom. Library. Import. Heart to the heart. So this is IC 1805, the Heart Nebula, but just the kind of the center portion of it. Did it again. Okay, it said it brought it. That is weird. So normally it pops it up in here. And then I have to drag it to a collection. Maybe you don't have to. That's just how I've always done it. So here we are. Got it finally inside of Lightroom. Here we go, develop. And we're going to go ahead and do my crop. 4:5. And you can crop to anything. And I'm not going to resize anything. Well, hold on. Maybe reposition that a little bit. There we go. So main thing we're going to start with here is that magenta cast on the outside is pretty bad. So what I like to do is just come immediately down here. It's the same color. As you can see, that dark purple, that's the same dark purple that's there. And if I then remove the saturation out of that, it's gone. So now I think that's already vastly improved like it is. But I can pump up some of the blue, make that really sing. And I do like that sort of rusty look of the edges, so we'll kind of pump them up a teeny bit as well. And see the impact I'm having. And then let's add some chroma, a little bit of vibrance. And 10, oh, between 1. Oh, it doesn't like 100. And then maybe a little tweak here. Wow, very cool. At least I think so. And then my favorite part. Let's go poke around and look at the different detail that ends up being in this image. I don't know, man. Not bad for backyard and Palm Desert. Especially when you get into these sort of really faint, wispy things that are the detail that's still showing up, and you can imagine how the light is in play here. Like right here, I don't know which star it is, but one of these stars is in front of this material, causing that direct light and causing them to be as bright as they are. And then other sections, like when you get over here, this has got to be out in front of some light source because it's blocking the light that's behind it. And all the different sort of, I mean, it's not flat. It's got detail in every little nook and cranny that you'd want to poke around and look. And then a really cool little cluster of stars right there. I'm sure it has a name. But anyways, so that's kind of it. That's my process and how I end up with pictures like this. Start with decent data. I mean, decent. I mean, it really doesn't have to be outstanding, but decent. Do a quality check of it. Run through it to make sure that you don't have guiding errors where the thing bounced or the dog ran into the tripod or a bird flew by or the wind's blowing and causing it to wiggle. Clear out those elements. And once you do that, if you've had to throw away a lot and you don't have a whole lot of data, that just tells you need to keep gathering some data. I recommend anywhere from 4 to 10 hours worth of data on anything, integration level. The more the better. I believe, let's see here, that image we're looking at right now, has 25 hours worth of integration in it. It had 76 and 69 and 73 narrowband images at 5 minutes each. And then the RGBs are 120 and about the same numbers. It's not as long, but I only was after the stars. Where I spent the most of my time was on the narrowband, which turned out to be, let's see, there's 12, almost 18 hours of that total 25 hours was just the narrowband imaging.
Your narrowband filters, what bandwidth?
7. I don't have the expensive ones. I got the. No, I would like to upgrade one day. We'll see. So the narrowbands, you come in how wide or how narrow you actually want to be. I believe it's nanometers or 7 nanometers is the typical what you get, but you can get down to 4 and 3, where that slice of light is even smaller. So there's not a whole lot of light coming into the camera at that point. You're getting just a very sliver, but you're getting a very specific color or emission line. No, you just need more signal. Just need more signal, and more signal is more time. And for one of the things I covered last week is exposure time. How much time should you expose for? In my case, I found here in the valley, when I'm imaging here, RGB, the filter itself, if I go any longer than 2 minutes, the background noise, which is the light pollution, just gets higher and higher. I try to keep that histogram so where when I'm imaging something, it's down in that last 20% of the far left side. Once it starts getting up higher than that, you're recording more background noise than you're recording signal. So even though it's a shorter exposure, you just keep piling them on. You get more and more and more and more and more of them, and they do make a difference. They start layering up. When we were first starting inside of Blink, you saw how much signal there was there for that galaxy. It wasn't a whole lot there, but where we ended up after having 70 files of each color of 2-minute exposures, the sum, it's so much brighter and has a whole lot of signal there. Wow, that thing has got a lot. I'm happy with this. How does it change? It's like factors of 10. It's really amazing. Not there. Let's go to Lightroom. So this is from a dark sky location. It was shot at one of our Joshua Tree star parties up at the theater. This is a single 5-minute exposure for each frame. 1 sulfur, 1 hydrogen alpha, 1 oxygen 3. And that's from Bortle 2 skies. I only had 1 image, so I'm not stacking images, so there's the satellite that went through during one of the filters. So I didn't have so Windsor, like I mentioned, that pixel rejection algorithm, it wants 20 images minimum so that it can actually work. If not, it'll still do a great job stacking, but it won't hide the stuff as well as it might have. So that's single, like I said, a single image for each filter. And this is the same. So dark skies make an enormous difference. Enormous difference. I don't know how this Bortle scale works, like earthquakes and Richter scale and hurricane scales, how they multiply upon themselves. I think it's similar scaling, so the difference between 2 and 7 is enormous. But yet, we still can do things like this. This is, again, a single filter, a single image for each filter. And that one's not. This has actually got more data in it. But, you might be able to tell the difference if I blinked between the two. But what you gain with more data is more detail in these regions, and where you can zoom in and start just, pixel peeping. And I believe this is only maybe like 6 hours. I shot this at home thinking, I wonder how this compares to the one I just did up in Joshua Tree. That's got a lot to it. There's a lot of data there. Shot at my house. So, all of these things, that's kind of it, folks. Any questions? Well, I let the computer do that. So, yeah, so last week we talked a lot about that. The process I use is basically I automate that using software and a computer that has control over the telescope mount, as well as a focuser motor on the telescope, as well as the filter wheel and the guide camera. So how does it know where to point? So before I have an imaging session,
I guess I'm saying, you said, let's go after M33. How do you find out about going after M33?
so I set that up in the computer beforehand, and I give it I tell it where to go, and then it goes. Or you can, if you don't have that much control, usually most go-to telescope systems, the handheld, the hand device that's with them, you can tell it once it knows what it's pointed at. So when you set up a mount that has a go-to system, you kind of polar align it as best you can, and then you point it at a star, make some adjustments, and say, yeah, I'm pointing at the star. You're looking in there or looking through your camera, and it's pointed at that star. Once it has that reference point, then it can pretty much find anything in the sky.
So, I mean, what made you decide to go after M33?
Because I wanted a galaxy and something I could shoot in RGB that's bright, that's going to be in the sky last week when I shot this for this presentation. And I've been wanting to go for it. It's starting to come up later now in the night. So I knew that by 9 o'clock it was going to be high enough to where I could start imaging it, but it was still not quite high enough yet.
I guess I'm basically saying is, of all the galaxies, all the spots in the world, you picked M33.
Oh, okay, so all the reasons. So the telescope I was using is an 800 millimeter focal length, and I knew that M33 would fill the field of view as much as possible. If I went to Andromeda, it would have overwhelmed, you would have only seen a small part of Andromeda in my image. So I knew M33 would be a good fit for the focal length. Other galaxies are smaller and more distant, and I would use a higher magnification telescope for them. So if I was going to go for like M51, I would use a 1700 millimeter telescope, which is twice as long as the telescope I shot those with.
It sounds like you did a lot of research on the specific stars that you focused on.
Yes. It's from years of obsessively looking at the sky, and this is probably the 10th time I've imaged M33.
Every year.
Every time it comes around, I tend to see if I can improve it and make it better, but my conditions changed. I got a new telescope, I got a new camera, I got a new gadget. They're all open game again. But the biggest part about why that galaxy was because it fit that telescope perfectly. You saw that it filled up most of the field of view for that telescope and that camera combination. Because your field of view is determined by the focal length of the telescope and the size of the imaging chip on your camera. So if it's a smaller chip, you don't see as much space. I mean, the light's hitting it still from the telescope, but the chip has cropped that image. So if you have a larger chip or like a full frame chip, that's a lot of cameras are these days, it sees a larger field of view. It sees more of that light coming from the telescope. So it's both. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of focal length and chip size. And how do I know which one I want to go after? Well, I just happen to be here on my laptop, so I can actually show you. And I showed this last week, and then we can wrap it up and have some questions here. I use Starry Night Pro. I like that application a lot. I don't know, I've been using it for 10, 15 years. So let's go full screen. This is what the sky looks like right now. I can go out here, and I've got all my presets in here, so I know where, I see my galaxy, and I see all the material. What you're seeing here up the middle here, that's the Milky Way over there, and then towards the north, you can see the different parts of the sky. So right now in the eastern sky is next to Triangulum, and we'll zoom in here. Did I not see it? There it is. All right. So one of the other cool tools that this has here is I can call up my field of view. So I got all kinds of things in here. I've got actually the telescope that's in there, the CDK 700. I've got it set up so I could see how much field of view it has compared to my others. So I'm imaging M33 with the SW800, which is the Skywatcher 800P. It's an astrograph F4, 8-inch Newtonian telescope. So the camera I'm using for that is the 2600 mm that's over here. I have a 1600. The 129 is my guide camera. I have a Sony a7S III. It's a full frame camera. You can see the different cameras potentially would work on that telescope. And so the field of view for the camera I'm using, and M33, and there it is. So I can see how it's going to fit. If I were to use one of my other telescopes instead of this one, say my wide field, same camera, but I'm using now a refractor that's a 70 millimeter refractor, it would look like that in its field of view. And then on my longest lens, it's there. That's the 1700 millimeter Dalkirchen. So that's how I start out. I just start exploring. I go, a lot of times, what's up tonight? And I'll just start doing this. I'll just come in here in this program and start panning around until I go, ooh, what's that? Or I'll have seen a picture of something someone else has shot, and I'll go look it up here and see how it fits. But you can see how Andromeda would fit inside my Newtonian. It's not very well. I'd want to shoot that with my stellar view or a refractor. And that's how I figured that out. Any other questions? What's you got, Gabriella? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, you did. You did see those. Well, nice spot. All right. So let's see where I'm at, 1014. All right. So when it first became really a thing, this was shot out past Acrisure in the middle of the desert of, oh gosh, what's this called? I can't think of the name all of a sudden. A3 or something? 2024 A3 or that's it. Yeah. So whoever sees it first, discovers it, gets their name on it. A lot of times it's a computer. Sometimes it's humans, so they get a human name. So this was, I'll tell you how this was shot. Camera was completely stationary, 70 millimeter lens, and I just I could see where the comet was, and I left it static. The camera just sat there. This is a 1/3 of a second exposure every 2 seconds, and I have about 200 of them. And the reason for that was light pollution. You can see all the lights that are around here, so I shot a lot of them, and I just let the thing drift right through my field of view. Then when I brought it back to the house to process it, using PixInsight, I told PixInsight to align the stars, but with a heavy rejection algorithm, the Wizard Sigma. And what it did was it lined all the stars, but the mountain and everything else below it was blurry, distorted, it's gone, because it locked on the stars and made that one solid image, but it was tracking over 35 minutes. So the sky moved. So then took that image, set it aside, took the same set of raw images and processed them and stacked them without the tracking part, and I got the mountain. Jump into Photoshop, remove the sky, drop in my comet, basically in the same spot, and then flatten and save. Well, and salt and pepper, start doing some color adjustments and stuff like that. And so that was the first time, and then I think the next day I went up to Sawmill Trailhead, and that's when I shot that one. And in this one, I had much darker skies, so the conditions were way better. And I don't know if you can see it down here on the tip a little bit. I don't know if I can. There we go. I got the anti-tail. And I don't know why they call it an anti-tail, because it's the tail, but it's just further behind the comet, where the comet is already gone. So as the comet's going around the sun, its tail is spewing off and leaving material as it comes around. And then as it's coming around, and now we see the comet with the tail sort of now perpendicular or to the side of us, that tail that's left behind that's fanned out that we can't see the big fan of, we're seeing the line of where that fan was. So that's the anti-tail, and I think I'm prescribing that, Predator, if you just nod yes. But that's, from what my understanding, what the anti-tail is. It's part of the tail, it's just what's left behind, and it's already gone, where the comet is coming flying around, and that's where the tail was sort of deposited behind it as it comes through. It's very dim, and it's cool when you can get it. Right? You can barely see it, yeah. And I only really saw it in long exposure photography. You can see This comet was well covered. There's images all over the internet. You'll see it. But so that same process, these were 10-second exposures instead of just a third of a second because I had darker skies. So my levels were much lower. So these are 10 seconds. And so when you jump in here, you can see at 70 mil, 10 seconds, the stars are moving. So that's how much a star moved at 70 millimeters on a camera in 10 seconds. And the cool thing is that little soft fuzzy right there, that's another comet. Way off in the distance. I don't know if it's the one coming towards us or it's just another. There's more than one comet in the sky at any time. It's just we can't see them so far away.
What was the lens again? I didn't catch that.
So this is all done on a 70 mil lens. This one and this one were both 70. Yeah, and then just this last one here, I went to the tram, thought the last hurrah a couple nights ago, I thought I would try and get it up there. I had a problem with light pollution, so I had to make a lot of compromises. So this is a heavy-duty composite. The sky is tracked, or not tracked, but drifted through and then assembled. The mountain was another series of shots because I had to avoid the lights from the mountain station. I was disappointed in how much I couldn't see stars at the tram. I was at the top. But anyways, I got something. So that concludes today's presentation. Thanks, everybody.